The canvas trembled as the crowd roared to life. Not for a title fight, not for a legacy bout, but for a moment no one ever expected to witness. Two worlds colliding in the most unpredictable way. On one side stood a man whose very name stirred memories of thunderous knockouts and primal fear. Mike Tyson, a force of nature forged in the chaos of 1980s boxing. Across from him, stepping into a world that was never supposed to meet his own, was Forrest Griffin, the heart and soul of the UFC's rise, a man who bled grit and awkward charm in equal measure. No one could make sense of it at first. Why were these two even in the same ring? And what kind of storm were we about to walk into? Tyson wasn't just a boxer. He was a cultural earthquake. His fists told stories of rage, pain, and a relentless hunger to dominate. From the moment he stepped into the ring, people knew something violent was about to unfold. But this wasn't 1988. This wasn't Iron Mike at 22, steamrolling opponents in under a minute. This was a version of Tyson that had lived, one who'd stared into the abyss, climbed out, and carried the scars as badges. Yet the fire behind those eyes, it never left. It just waited. Forrest Griffin, meanwhile, was the unlikeliest gladiator to share space with Tyson. Not because he wasn't tough. Anyone who saw his legendary clash with Stephen Bonnar knew this man didn't fold. He thrived in chaos. But this was different. This wasn't a fight built on technical expectations or weight class parity. It was a raw experiment in what happens when heart and havoc meet in the middle of a ring. Forrest didn't come from the streets like Tyson. He didn't grow up fighting for his next meal, but he earned every ounce of respect the hard way, through wars, comebacks, and the kind of resilience you can't coach. The fight wasn't sanctioned by any major body. There were no belts on the line, no press tour that made it feel official. It was whispered about before it was confirmed. A hush moved through combat sports forums like a rumor no one wanted to believe until it stared them in the face. What started as an off-the-record challenge at a closed-door event had escalated. Videos leaked. Sparring footage, glimpses of Tyson hitting pads with alarming speed. Forrest, seen stepping into a gray gym, bruised but smiling. Always smiling. Something was brewing, and the internet couldn't look away. There was no clear setting for this clash. Not at first. Whispers of an underground venue. Dim lights, no broadcast deal, no giant sponsors. Just a ring, two warriors, and enough anticipation to short-circuit social media. What made this even more surreal wasn't just the names, but the timing. Tyson had been edging back into the spotlight, throwing hands with younger fighters for charity, hinting that the old beast still had teeth. Forrest had long retired, settling into a quieter role in the UFC's background, training and mentoring. But something, maybe pride, maybe curiosity, drove him back out. People speculated endlessly. Was it a real fight or an exhibition? Would Tyson be allowed to go full throttle, or was it going to be another carefully curated display? Forrest wasn't built for shows. He fought like he didn't know how to do anything else. If he stepped in there, it was with purpose. And Tyson, well, Tyson never needed much reason to turn the temperature up. The energy between the two became impossible to ignore. One was born in the chaos of Brooklyn. The other built his name in the blood-soaked infancy of modern MMA. Different paths, different weapons, but both defined by one thing: unpredictability. When the first stare-down photo surfaced, just a grainy, off-center shot of Tyson and Griffin nose to nose, everything exploded. Commentators scrambled to make sense of it. Fans went into overdrive. It didn't matter whether it was in a ring or a cage, whether gloves were 8 ounces or 10. This wasn't about rules. It was about the idea. What happens when unfiltered aggression meets unshakable endurance? When the man known for destroying the will of fighters in seconds is forced to deal with someone who never understood how to quit. Training footage started surfacing just weeks out. Tyson, leaner, meaner, with a level of sharpness that shouldn't have been possible at his age. Forrest, awkward, relentless, absorbing punishment in the gym just to keep pressing forward. Their styles couldn't have been more different. Tyson, precision and power. Forrest, volume and volume again. But the one thing they shared was the ability to dig, to find something deep down when everything else is stripped away. And that's where the story got interesting. This wasn't about resumes. No one cared about how many belts Tyson had, or the fact that Forrest was once light heavyweight champion. This was about raw energy, a throwback to when fights weren't sanitized, when emotions were part of the package, when two men walked into a space and agreed to leave something behind when they left. There was something primal about it, like watching two elements of nature cross paths for the first time. One explosive, one persistent. One trying to end it with a single shot, the other daring it to last just long enough to wear it down. The night of the fight wasn't like any other. There were no walkouts, no theme music blaring through giant speakers. Just two silhouettes approaching from opposite ends of a narrow hall. Tyson's pace was steady, eyes locked forward, breathing calm but calculated. Forrest bounced lightly, a grin twitching at the edge of his mouth. Not mocking, just alive. Like he'd waited his whole life for a fight that made no sense at all. And now it was here. What happened next didn't unfold like a typical first round. It wasn't a clean break of the gloves followed by measured exchanges. It was something else. Something raw. Tyson came forward like a missile. Forrest didn't retreat. The air crackled with a kind of electricity no crowd could contain. Every sound, every shuffle, every breath seemed louder. And then, a right hand. Fast, brutal, but it didn't land clean. Instead, it grazed. Forrest spun, slipped, and then countered. Tyson's eyes narrowed. And for a second, just 1 second, the entire room froze. Because in that moment, no one knew which direction this war was about to go. The ring pulsed like a living thing, each step echoing with a tension that couldn't be measured by time or sound. Tyson didn't blink. Forrest exhaled through his nose, recalibrating. The crowd, even though limited in number, held their collective breath. That grazing punch hadn't connected clean, but it was a message. Tyson still had fire behind those hands. Yet the fact that Griffin hadn't crumbled, hadn't even flinched, changed the atmosphere. Tyson wasn't facing another victim. He was facing a man who wanted to find out exactly how much chaos his body could survive. Griffin adjusted his stance, not out of fear, but strategy. He wasn't trying to trade blow for blow with Tyson. That would be suicide. Instead, he was starting to read, to calculate, not the speed of Tyson's fists, but the rhythm in between, the pauses, the micro-hesitations. And that's when it happened. Tyson feinted left, dipped his shoulder, and came in with a brutal hook aimed just beneath the ribs. Forrest twisted, took it partially, but stayed upright. Barely. His eyes widened for a second, not in fear, but in recognition. That kind of power didn't feel like it belonged in this setting. It was ancient, like a reminder of why Tyson once ruled a kingdom of broken jaws and short careers. But Forrest didn't go down. He pressed in close, clinched, whispered something nobody could hear. Tyson grinned. It wasn't a friendly grin. It was the smile of a predator acknowledging a worthy opponent. And then, something shifted. Tyson, for the first time, stepped back on his own. Not because he had to, because he was starting to respect what was in front of him. Not the resume, not the size, but the sheer stubbornness. Forrest wasn't supposed to survive these exchanges, and yet he was still in front of him, still smiling like he wanted more. The twist came when the referee signaled for a brief pause. Something was wrong. Not with either fighter, but with the corner. Tyson's trainer was waving, not in panic, but urgency. A whisper started to move through the small room. Confusion. Murmurs. Tyson turned briefly, eyes narrowing at his team. And that's when the real surprise broke. An unauthorized figure had apparently made their way backstage, reportedly attempting to interfere with the fight's progression. No one knew who. The security team swarmed in, pulling people back. The bout was paused, the fighters separated. In the middle of this madness, Forrest leaned against the ropes, breathing steady, eyes scanning the chaos like he'd seen this before, like he'd been in fights where the danger wasn't just across from you, but lurking outside the ring too. Tyson didn't sit. He just paced, jaw locked, fists flexing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't showbiz. This wasn't controlled. It had started to turn into something entirely different, something bordering on unsanctioned warfare. Word finally trickled in that the intruder had been someone with a grudge from Tyson's past. No weapons, no direct threat, just noise. But it was enough to break rhythm. Enough to disturb the mental space both fighters had carved out. And maybe that was the point. Tyson had faced chaos outside the ring before, but never during a fight like this. Forrest, surprisingly, was the calmer of the two, almost amused by it all. He bounced lightly on his heels again, refocused. Then, without warning, the bell rang. No announcement. No reset countdown. Just the signal. Tyson turned and immediately launched. No touch of gloves. No easing in. Just violence. Pure, explosive motion. Forrest ducked, caught a jab to the cheek, stumbled back, and came forward with a wide overhand right. Not to hurt, but to create space. It worked. Tyson hesitated for just a second. Long enough. Forrest didn't take the offensive. Instead, he spoke, audibly, enough for those close to hear. "You still hungry, Mike? Or just looking for ghosts?" That sentence didn't land like a punch. It landed like a sledgehammer to the psyche. Tyson froze. Not entirely, but enough to make his next punch mistimed. Forrest dodged, leaned into the moment, capitalized, body shot. Another. Then a clinch. The room shifted, not because Forrest was winning, but because he was doing something no one had expected. He was pulling Tyson out of his element. Not with technique, not with power, but with conversation. With pressure that didn't come from fists. Tyson tried to reset, but Forrest stayed inside the pocket, smothering the rhythm, disrupting the tempo. This wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but it was working, and that's what made it dangerous. The legend of Tyson thrived on fear, on intimidation. Forrest, either by strategy or sheer recklessness, was stripping that away, one weird exchange at a time. And just when it looked like the round would devolve into a messy brawl, the twist deepened. Tyson stepped back, gloves lowered slightly, not in surrender, but like he remembered something. Not from this fight, but from another time. Another opponent. Maybe it was Holyfield. Maybe Douglas. Whatever it was, it snapped something back into place. He shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Legs bent with more spring. The old Tyson, not just angry, but calculated, began to emerge. Forrest saw it too. His grin faded, just slightly. The fun was over. The next punch Tyson threw wasn't wild. It was clean. Sharp. Right down the center. Forrest blocked, but stumbled. Then another, left hook. Glanced off. Forrest's legs buckled for a split second, but he recovered. He answered with a left kick. Legal in this modified format, but risky. Tyson absorbed it. No expression change. Just pressure. Forward, always forward. The seconds ticked. Nobody was breathing normally anymore. Not in the ring, not outside it. Everyone knew something was coming. Tyson's gloves were rising with more speed now. Forrest's counters were getting shorter, more desperate. This wasn't just a battle of fists. It was turning into a war of attrition. Who would break first? And why did it feel like the real fight hadn't even started yet? The next exchange was a blur. Tyson feinted a right. Forrest bit, stepped the wrong way, and caught a left to the ribs so clean it echoed like a whip crack. He staggered. Tyson advanced. But before the final blow could land, the bell rang again. Both men froze. Tyson stared. Forrest, hands down, nodded once. Neither moved. Something was wrong. The crowd didn't cheer, because the bell hadn't been scheduled. And somewhere, just off camera, a figure stepped into the shadows behind the curtain. Watching. Silent. And suddenly, this fight was no longer just between Tyson and Griffin. No one moved at first. Not the fighters. Not the ref. Not the few security personnel still scattered around the ring. The second bell, sharp and out of rhythm, felt like it didn't belong to the match. It felt like it belonged to something else. Tyson's breathing slowed, but his eyes remained locked on Forrest, who was no longer smiling. Forrest's gaze had shifted, not toward his opponent, but toward that narrow gap in the curtain. The figure was still there, barely visible in the dim light, hands at their sides, unmoving. Tyson finally turned his head slightly, following Griffin's line of sight, just enough to catch a glimpse. And just like that, the energy in the room twisted again. The official stepped forward, uncertain, almost hesitant. "Back to your corners," he said, voice wavering. Tyson didn't move. Forrest backed up slowly, keeping his eyes on the curtain. Then, without warning, the figure stepped out. Not into the ring. Just far enough that his face caught the light. He wasn't famous. Not a fighter. But anyone who had followed Tyson's story closely would recognize the man. A former trainer. A ghost from the days before Cus D'Amato. The man responsible for one of Tyson's earliest departures from discipline. Rumors had swirled around him for years. Debt, scams, betrayal. And now, Here he was, silent, not saying a word, just watching. Tyson froze. The expression on his face changed, not anger, not confusion. Something deeper, something unsettled. Forrest caught it immediately. This fight had never really been about proving who had more left in the tank. It had always been about closure. Tyson wasn't trying to knock out Griffin. He was trying to fight something inside himself. And suddenly, with that man standing there, the real opponent had shown up. Forrest stepped forward again, ignoring the ref, ignoring protocol. He raised the glove, lightly tapped it against Tyson's chest. "Let's finish this," he said, almost too softly for anyone to hear. It wasn't bravado. It was an anchor. A way to pull Tyson back into the ring, away from the ghosts and into the now. Tyson blinked. The trance cracked. He nodded once, barely. The final round started with no bell, just a shared look, a silent agreement. Tyson came forward with a speed that defied his age. This time, it wasn't wild. It was clean, efficient, sharp. Griffin countered with a knee to the body, snuck in under modified rules. Tyson absorbed it, snapped a right hand across the jaw. Forrest didn't fall. Instead, he answered with 3 quick punches that peppered Tyson's guard. Then, a short elbow that clipped the ear. The crowd, sparse as it was, had no time to cheer. The exchanges were too fast, too layered. Then it happened. Griffin ducked low, trying to roll under a left hook, and Tyson caught him clean with an uppercut. Not the monster uppercut from his youth, but enough to lift Forrest off his feet for a split second. He hit the mat with a thud that echoed like a closing door. The ref jumped in, began the count. Forrest rolled to his side, eyes blinking rapidly. He looked toward Tyson, not with fear, with a strange calm. At the count of 8, he stood. Barely. The ref looked into his eyes, checked his gloves, and waved them back in. Tyson didn't charge. He just circled. He saw it. Griffin was hurt, but not broken. So he waited, and that hesitation gave Forrest just enough space to move. The last 30 seconds were pure chaos. They traded in a blur of sweat, blood, and raw will. Neither man wanted to be the one who stepped back. Not now. Not after everything. Tyson landed to the body. Griffin fired back with a spinning elbow that grazed the temple. Tyson grabbed the clinch, drove knees in retaliation. They broke apart, breathing fire, chests heaving. And then, without warning, the final bell sounded. For real this time. No celebration followed, no immediate reaction. Tyson turned, walked to his corner. Forrest bent at the waist, hands on his knees, nodding to himself like he'd survived something no one would ever fully understand. The referee moved to the center of the ring. There was no official decision yet. The judges, if they were even there, weren't quick to announce anything. But it didn't matter. The result wasn't in the scorecards. It was written on their faces. Forrest approached Tyson again. No cameras in his face, no microphones. Just one man to another. He reached out, offered a handshake. Tyson stared at it for a moment, then pulled him into a full hug. That's when the final twist came. As they stood there, the man behind the curtain began to walk away. But someone from Tyson's team, recognizing him fully now, stopped him, pulled him aside. A heated exchange followed, not physical, but tense enough that voices rose. Tyson noticed. He stepped through the ropes, moved toward them. Forrest stayed in the ring, watching. The man, once a shadow from Tyson's past, was escorted out, but not before he turned to Tyson and said something, quiet but pointed. Tyson didn't respond. He just stared, then turned back to Forrest. "He wanted me to throw it," Tyson said, loud enough for those near the ring to hear. Silence. That revelation landed heavier than any punch that night. Forrest looked at him, surprised, but not shocked. "You didn't," he said simply. Tyson shook his head. "Not for anyone." And just like that, the noise returned. Applause. Cheers. Not for the outcome, but for the choice. This fight, strange as it was, had become something more. A confrontation not just between two fighters from different disciplines, but between the past and the present, legacy and regret, pain and peace. And in that ring, surrounded by dim lights and echoes of forgotten wars, two men proved something that couldn't be scripted. Sometimes, the most important victory is walking away on your own terms. As Tyson raised Forrest's arm, the cameras caught it. A moment that didn't belong to boxing or MMA, but something in between. A space where stories are finished not with knockouts, but with truth. And long after the lights dimmed and the crowd drifted into silence, people kept talking. Not about who won, but about what it meant.